Afternoon, good evening, good morning, good day, wherever we're finding you. Hello. So excited that you're able to join us for what we hope is a action-packed, exciting, informative, fun conversation focused on Bobcat athletics. My name is Joey Seltzer. I'm one of the senior associate deans in the admission office here at Bates. I'm also a Bates graduate, class of 2003, and was lucky enough to play field hockey and run track when I was a Bates student back in the day, which was admittedly 20 years ago. So luckily for you all, it's not based on my experience. We have real live Bates students with us. We have a couple of our coaches and one of my colleagues joining the conversation as well. So between the 6 of us, hopefully we can tackle a lot of your questions. I'm gonna walk through the panelists and have them introduce themselves, and then I'll introduce kind of the exercise, what we're gonna do in our time together, and then we'll get going. So I'm gonna work down from the top of my screen. Aidan, you're at the top. Do you wanna introduce yourself first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Aidan. I'm going into the senior year. I'm a politics and sociology double major. I'm originally from New Hampshire, and I'm one of the captains on the men's rowing team.
And you can hand the baton off, Aidan. We'll do it that way if you want.
Awesome. Christopher, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Aidan. I'm Christopher. I'm a rising senior from Burlington, Vermont. I'm a double major in studio art and physics, and I am on the men's cross country and track and field teams. I am also a part of the House Food Ballooning Club, which is a fun club, and I've worked with Bates admission team. So I'm excited to share my experiences today. And Jared, do you want to introduce yourself?
So hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jared Rivers. I'm a Senior Associate Dean and Director for Diversity Enrollment in the Admission Office at Bates College. I've been with Bates for the past 7 years. However, I've been in the field of admissions for the past 19 and have been with 4 different institutions in that time. I also was a men's basketball player as an undergraduate myself, and so I'm happy to be here with you. So I will hand off to John.
Hey, everybody. My name's John Furbush. I'm the head men's basketball coach at Bates. I'm a graduate 2005. I played soccer, basketball, and baseball during my time. Not something I advise from a time management perspective, but I tried to do it all. I'm going into my 13th season as the head coach and really excited to answer any questions you may have about Bates in the process. Alison.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bates virtually. I am the women's basketball coach here at Bates. That awesome crowd you see behind Coach Furbush was undoubtedly for a women's game. Don't mind the potential men on the court, but I have been here for 5 years. I am not a Bates alum, but did graduate in 2005 from one of our competitors in the awesome NESCAC. But just excited to be here and to answer any questions that you all have.
Great, thank you all. Excited to get started. So folks in the room, I'm kind of curious, using the raise your hand function at the bottom, for students listening to us, who has been in touch with a Bates coach so far? Just raise your hand on the raise your hand function. Great. Oh, wow. Pretty much most of the group. Awesome. And of that group, who is going into their senior year of high school, their last year of high school? And then last question for those of you listening, who is joined by a family member today? Great. Awesome. That's really helpful. So typically if you were on campus, we'd be able to see that. So I'd like to hear that stuff and understand who's listening to us. We have, a good healthy 45 minutes of conversation here, and we want to take full advantage of it by answering your questions. So hopefully you're all our Zoom experts by now, but if not, at the bottom, another function of this webinar is the Q&A. So if you go to the question and answer section, you can start typing in your questions, and Jared and I will moderate those, feed them to our panelists, and insert some of our expertise as well, we hope. So don't hesitate. You don't have to be waiting to the end to get your questions in. Now is the time to get those questions in. But to start with, I'm going to ask maybe Coach Montgomery to talk a little bit about the recruitment process. So for a student in their senior year, going into senior year September, what can they expect? What does it look like? I know it can vary from sport to sport, but in general, what does the recruitment process look like at this point?
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting question to answer right now, I think, because it's sort of generally how that process might look, and where we're at this year might be a little bit different. But I can first just speak to the timeline for those student athletes who are approaching their senior year, and sort of talk about how that would typically unfold, and just maybe how this year it might vary a little bit. Like everything else, we don't really have a ton of answers to a lot of things right now, but sort of how we imagine it unfolding. I think for starters, like just making sure that you are really directly in touch with coaches at all schools that you're interested in. I mean, that should start early, but certainly if there's some schools where you haven't had direct contact, or if you're interested in playing a sport at Bates and have not had that contact with a coach, I think most of the athletes on the call have, but that's really, really important to establish that direct communication. In our case, for women's basketball, by now we would have had quite a few opportunities to evaluate student athletes playing live. That has been quite a bit different this spring and summer, where we have relied heavily on watching film and also talking to coaches about ability level, and also just sort of as character references for potential student athletes. So I think, certainly sending as much film as you possibly can to coaches. We love highlight videos for sure, because those can give us a quick glance at all your finest moments, but I would really recommend sending full game film so that we have that opportunity as well. I always like to joke that I feel like I could put together a really stellar highlight film just of all my finest moments, even as a 37-year-old retired athlete. So it certainly gives us a frame of reference, but just kind of seeing a full game is really important, at least in the world of basketball. And then sort of making sure you have sent along all your academic information. We're able to get a good feel for just where you might fit in terms of the Bates admissions process by gathering your transcript, the courses that you've taken, and your school profile. So those pieces of information are really important to send along. And then I would say typically in September and October, at least for our timeline, we love to get student athletes on campus in person for visits, to spend time with our team, and to even have the opportunity to play with our team, to attend class. And that is not possible this year. But we are doing a lot of alternative things, Zooming with athletes on our team, with faculty members, our faculty liaisons, for example. Just kind of each case might be different depending on what a student is interested in. But we've gotten really creative with ways to bring Bates to you virtually. Certainly not, the best substitute, but the best we can do for now. So we are operating under, most of our recruitment happens in the early decision process. So really those decisions are made by November 15th. But around, September, October is typically when we get sort of a verbal agreement that Bates is a top choice and that you will become a supported student athlete. So that is something also that might be a little bit different this year, just based on windows and student athletes and coaches' timelines about when those decisions are made. But we are still operating along that timeline of early decision, but certainly might be more flexible for regular decision as well. So that's kind of timeline, both how it's gone and how I envision it moving forward.
So we have a few questions that have just come in, and one is very student focused. So perhaps Aidan or Christopher, if you guys could chat a little bit about what kind of academic support services are available to student athletes.
Yeah, I can totally hop in. Aidan, you can add on after whatever I miss. So at Bates, we have the Academic Resource Commons. There's a lot of resources that are open to all students. I think that, any student at Bates will find so many resources, but the ARC, the Academic Resource Commons, is one of my favorite places. And there you have tutors that are either attached with your course or general tutors, either in the Math Stats workshop or the Writing Center. And often there will be professors even joining you there to help you out. Those are just swipe in, free for students. I know that I would often go there with my physics homework my first year, and I wouldn't have any questions yet. I wouldn't have even started, and I would sit down and I would see other students in my class there. And as I work through the problem set, if a question came up, oftentimes the TA would be answering it right there for another student, and I would just join the conversation. So really collaborative space, and there's plenty of academic help there, and your professors definitely work with students through your time to make sure that, if you need to go to the office hours to get some help, just walk right in. They're more than happy to help you. Yeah.
And Aidan, one other question for you. To your knowledge, do student athletes get preferential treatment when selecting courses?
So I guess to my knowledge, no, because when we do course registration, it's usually like a randomized process. But the kind of benefit that we do have is that there is a block of time between, I think it's like 4 and 7 or 7:30, typically, that there are no classes offered. And that's usually when most sports will have practices too. And we sometimes will have morning practices too that will coincide before 8 a.m. classes. So there's never been a time, at least in my instance, where athletics have overlapped with choosing classes. So no, we don't necessarily get any preferential treatment with picking classes, but there isn't like an overlap of there aren't classes offered during typical practice times.
Perfect. And John, if I could get you here in the mix, will recruits at some point be able to attend unofficial visits and stay with the team?
Not in 2020. I think there's hope for 2021. Obviously, after the application has been filled out, and hopefully the spread of the virus slows down, and we can have people on campus visiting in the springtime as they're making their decisions. Especially for the regular decision applicants who will have a little bit more time before that decision is made. We'll be able to visit the campus and meet some of the team, but unfortunately, we will not have any visitors to campus through this year. And please correct me if I'm wrong, if that's the case, but that's the impression that I'm under.
No, that's the news that we've been given. So unfortunately, we are not bringing visitors to the Bates campus for the remainder of this calendar year. So I think we'll have to be it'll be a bit more unique, perhaps through Zoom. I suppose would be the best way for recruits to potentially meet current team members. That being said, if we could get another question in here, are there any sports at Bates for B-level athletes? If maybe we could talk a little bit about club sports and intramurals, maybe both from the student and the coach perspective. Anyone want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about intramural sports. I knew that during my first year, I did some intramural soccer on the side, and I had an absolute blast with that. I did some soccer in high school, but didn't continue with that halfway through. And so getting an opportunity to, go with my teammates on the cross country and some of the Nordic kids as well. We formed a team together, and that's like a co-ed experience. and was a total blast. And yeah, so that's open. There's other intramural sports as well, but I know that there's even like a club soccer team as well, and there's some hockey. Yeah, so
Sure.
definitely look them up as well online. I think that there'll be more information specifically about each club and intramural team we have.
And Aidan, going back to you, can you talk or describe residential life? Our student athletes, do they typically live together on campus?
So I think, it's going to vary a little bit. Usually during your first year, you're kind of assigned a roommate based on like living preferences. So I've heard of instances where sometimes people on the same team just get like kind of matched together. But I don't think that's definitely not a common thing that happens. Beyond after your first year, you can choose all sorts of different living accommodations. So there are singles, there are doubles, all the way up to suites. And you get to choose who you want to live with. I can be the case that some people, I personally have lived with people on my team throughout my past couple years. But then I also have a lot of friends on the team who live with other friends who are not on the team or get singles, so there's all sorts of different options to choose from. So I would say there's no kind of, I wouldn't say all athletes live together, but it's definitely an option for your upperclassmen years.
Perfect. I love this next question. Someone is asking about other things that athletes get involved with, which is a discussion that we often have in the admission office. So I'd love to hear from maybe a coach and either Aidan or Christopher, from your perspective, are students getting involved in the overall Lewiston Auburn community? And to your knowledge, what sorts of things are they doing?
Happy to hop in here. We run a lot of local youth basketball clinics that my players are involved with, and so then in turn what they end up doing is getting local school and teacher. Actually, one of the teachers is a former assistant coach of mine who teaches a kindergarten class locally. So we'll have a variety of my players will go visit the school and read to the kids and hang out with them and just do some things in the community. And then we always invite some youth teams or those kids and their families to our games, and they'll come and get a team meal and commons before the game. They can sort of be involved with our pregame routine a little bit. So I think we're really active within the community. Some of the kids locally look at us like we're NBA stars, and so we really want to make sure that we're not, just so you know, but we're from their lens, we are. So we really want to make sure that they have an enjoyable experience while they're on our campus. That's just an example of one of the things that we do.
And Aidan or Christopher, have you guys gotten involved with the community? And if so, how so?
We try to do every year as a rowing team one of the aspiration days, which are partners with the Harwood Center. And similarly, we will invite, usually it's middle school students, to come to campus for the day. And then one kind of activity is they spend some time with the rowing team, and we usually do like a lot of kind of fun games and stuff like that with them, and kind of talk to them a little bit about what it's like to row, since I don't know that necessarily the middle schools and high schools in the area have rowing programs. So we kind of just tell them a little bit about what it's like. We sometimes show them how to erg and things like that. So we kind of try to do some fun things with the middle school periodically throughout the year.
That's fantastic. And I would say from an admission standpoint, I would definitely encourage the participants to think about the things that they want to be involved with, whether it's in the Lewiston Auburn community or the different clubs and organizations that they might want to join beyond just their immediate athletic sport. We're always trying to we're always looking to bring students to campus who are not only going to help our athletic teams, but who are going to add their skills, their talents, their passions, their culture, their diversity, and really every dimension of that word to the overall Bates community. So again, great question. Joey, if I can pass off a few to you, I think I'll do that.
Thanks, Jared. Have I mentioned that I miss you? I feel like every Zoom presentation I've had with folks lately, I'm like, I miss you guys. So it's great to hear you talk and present Bates because I haven't been able to do that in a while. Super cool. So we have a lot of great questions. Keep them coming. Thanks, guys. I'm Coach Alison Montgomery. This is your opportunity. Give us the pitch. What defines the Bates student athlete experience in relation to all the other wonderful options our students have?
Thanks, Joey. So I think that question was sort of asked about just other similar schools, and I guess I can sort of talk about how I think Bates might stand out compared to other NESCAC schools, because I certainly know for us, and I think it's pretty true across sports at Bates, that, you know, we typically recruit against a lot of our NESCAC competitors because student athletes are drawn to this conference for really great and obvious reasons, because of the quality of the education, the size of the school, the great locations, and like the really, really great athletics. So I think something that's really important for me in my recruiting pitch when I talk about Bates is that I want to form a relationship with student athletes, and I want student athletes to fall in love with Bates specifically. There are a number of reasons why you might be looking at a handful of NESCAC schools and think, oh, they're all so great. How do I sort of choose? I'm just going to go to whichever one, A, I might get into, or B, a coach might have a spot for me. And I would advise against that. I would really sort of challenge perspectives to really find their fit both with their program, so with the specific coach, with the specific athletes and program, because while we are a Division III school, you will be spending a lot of time with your coach and with your fellow student athletes on your team. So I think really finding that fit sort of personally, finding a culture that you can believe in, and some folks that you want to work really hard with and win with is really, really important. And I think just finding something really, really specific about Bates outside of your program that you really love, you really identify with. So it could have something to do with our location. We are, as the question was just asked about, sort of community service work. That is really at the heart and soul of the Bates mission. And I think it's a huge part of our identity. And we are located uniquely in an area that has some really great opportunities for service by our students and to form a great relationship with our community. So that's something that I talk to student athletes a lot about. And that is something that, you know, I think a lot of student athletes relate to and really get excited about, is something that makes us sort of stand out. You know, I will say, I feel like Bates also stands out as a really, really inclusive place. It's a place where from its inception, all individuals were admitted, you know, women, people of color were admitted from the start. And that's sort of, I think, also something that's at the heart and soul of our institution, that I actually find student athletes will bring up to me in the recruiting process is something that they thought was unique about Bates as they did some research. So I think, you know, those are a couple things that I think are talked about often, but I think it's sort of on you as student athletes, as you're doing this really important search, to find things that really, really speak to you. Because I think as a coach, I try to just quite honestly avoid student athletes and families who are NESCAC shopping, shall we say, who, again, for wonderful, completely understandable reasons, want to be in the NESCAC. It's a very desirable fit. But I just would sort of challenge each of you to find that niche, both with your program and with the school specifically.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Coach Furbush, I know your team has some really great alumni networks that you're plugged into. One of our students asked about how athletics feeds into or could interfere with this idea of career development, purposeful work. Can you talk a little bit about how your students and how you observe Bates students navigate the career development process?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's something that I sell in the recruiting process, is that we have a really strong alumni network who was taken care of by the alums before them. And so they're just paying it forward to the students now. And so I'm very active in cultivating my alumni support network. And so I get a lot of them involved with the team through Zooms right now, but typically it'll be, in a campus setting. So when COVID started, I ran a weekly Zoom series where we had over 40 alums from the 1960s through last year come and speak to our current team about their Bates experience, how they use what they studied and how it relates to what they do now. And just gave them an idea of you don't have to panic when you graduate. If you were an econ major, doesn't mean you have to go into business or finance. And so I think that real life experience speaks a lot of volume. And so having alums come back and talk about what they do now to the current students really puts them at ease. And a lot of times those conversations in that group setting lead to one-on-one conversations that lead to internships, that lead to jobs. Because at the end of the day, I hate to be the one to tell everybody here this, your athletic career is going to end. And it's very typical. It ends after college. And so you have to really think about what you're going to do for the next 40 years, not just the next 4. And so having that alumni network and support system to help you propel into the real world is super, super important.
Great. Thank you. I'm still waiting for Coach to give me another call. like sign up, get me a jersey. I'd love to play again.
Well,
Hasn't
I can
happened.
bring you over to the men's basketball alumni network.
Thanks, Coach. I can make a 3. So Adrian and Adriana have 2 questions that I think meld well together for both Aidan and Christopher. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the general atmosphere on campus, the classroom environment, relationships with faculty? So thinking about other layers of support that might draw students to Bates. What has that been like for you?
I can start. And then Christopher, if you have anything else too. I mean, I think the one really important thing that was mentioned earlier, but I think is always a really nice thing, that is we have faculty liaisons for each team. So each team has a professor who's kind of associated with the team in some way. Usually they'll stop by a practice at some point. Usually they'll come to games or meets or things like that if they can. And they're just kind of there to be that bridge between coaches and then professors. So if there were to ever be a conflict, where maybe you have to miss a class or something for a meet or something along the lines of that, they can help facilitate discussions with professors about organizing, making up that work, and then receiving any type of support based on that. So that's kind of been my experience as far as kind of that bridge between the two sides of being a student athlete. So I think the professors are really accommodating, and they really definitely are willing to work with athletes to make sure that they can help support you to the best that they are able to. And usually as long as you give them some advance notice, they're always very, very accommodating to do extra office hours for you to help work through things. I don't know, Christopher, do you have any other experiences?
Yeah, I think that mentioning the faculty liaisons was like exactly what I was thinking of. Also just say that upperclassmen on the sports teams are just fantastic leaders. They're there to help you, guide you through that first year in college at Bates, and will also kind of help you along the way, balancing that line of academics and athletics. It was inspiring my first year watching these upperclassmen, hearing about their thesis that they were working on towards the end of the year, or hearing students go on to do Fulbrights, get Fulbright scholarships. So I was both motivated, athletically to reach my athletic goals, but then also academically. So I think that you'll find Bates students that are Scarlet athletes are just so well-rounded, and no matter what they're doing, so on campus with academics or on the field, they're putting their all into it, putting their heart into it, and that's just the culture that you'll find.
I'd love to jump back in here with one of these questions, Joey. If I can take this one, I was actually a walk-on, and so for the coaches, are all student athletes recruited, or do we have walk-ons at Bates? John or Alison, whoever would like to take that one.
Go ahead. I'll follow up after you.
Okay. Yeah, we could both answer that. I think the first thing I would say is you have to communicate really well and directly and clearly with the coach that you're working with in that particular sport, because I think we all have different philosophies and we have different size teams, and there's so many factors that can really make the answer to this question a bit different. I would say for me as the women's basketball coach, we do not have opportunities for walk-ons generally. We have a smaller roster. We recruit a pretty small number of women each year. And for me, I treat the recruiting process as a pretty kind of, there's a lot of relationship building that goes into that. And I want to feel like I have a great feel for the women coming into my program, and they have a great feel for me and my program. So typically no, but I will say when it gets to the point where I've been working with a student athlete and we've been sort of involved in the recruiting process, and I say to that student athlete, I don't have a spot to sort of support your application. However, it could turn into a conversation where I can say, however, if you apply to Bates and you are admitted, you will have an opportunity to try out. So I just think you want to be really, really clear with coaches, use really clear language, make sure you completely understand what the situation is if you're admitted and what kind of opportunity you will have. I know some of those conversations can maybe be difficult and awkward, but you just got to do it because it's really important to understand where you'll stand if admitted. Coach, what do you got? Anything different?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is slightly tainted because I had an amazing person my second year at Bates as the head coach that, did everything possible to be part of the program and really didn't play much for 4 years and ended up being a captain as a senior. And so it's a big time commitment that I've had a lot of students who end up on the Bates campus and they want to try out for basketball. And there's a pretty extensive preseason routine that our athletes, walk-ons, may jump in on those workouts for a month and then realize, wow, this is not for me. So I do offer tryouts to people that commit to our preseason, but I'm very clear on the front end that this is a very unlikely scenario, and you might be wasting 8 weeks of your time working out, knowing that you will not have a roster spot. So kind of mirroring what Coach Montgomery said, I think it's a low percentage, but it's not zero. And so there are opportunities, but having clear language and conversations with the head coaches is very, very important.
Yes, I'll spare you my personal story, but I was a walk-on at my first institution and it didn't really work out, and I ended up transferring not once but twice. But it worked out in the end. So going back to the students, are student athletes allowed to study abroad? Have either of you done that? Do you know of other student athletes who have, if you did not?
Yeah, so student athletes certainly can. I studied abroad in Italy this past semester. I think it's a conversation that you have with your coach. And for me, they knew that was a part of my education experience that I really felt strongly about. And so they were happy that I got that experience.
And Aidan, any favorite tradition at Bates, or it can be sports related, but doesn't have to be?
I really love, one of my favorite traditions we have at Bates is short term. So short term is the kind of few week period. It's that small semester we have right at the end of the year. So it's usually falls like late April to mid-May. And it's one of my favorite times of the year for a lot of different reasons. One, it's normally kind of our peak rowing season. So that's right, usually when we're kind of deep into having a lot of meets and getting kind of closer to championship season. It's also just really nice out. And it's usually like you get to see absolutely some of the best of Maine during those kind of few weeks. And the other benefit is that you're usually taking, you are taking one class. So versus the typical course load you would take during short term, you only focus on one course. And a lot of times people do courses that are kind of just something interesting or outside of your major or something kind of fun. So I've taken like a debate class, which was really cool. And it's really nice because you get to spend all of your time really just kind of focusing on one thing. So those are kind of all of the reasons collectively that I think short term is probably my favorite debates tradition we have.
Awesome. And this is kind of an open question really for coaches or students. But touching on facilities, and I don't know if if perhaps the athletic department is developing a tour at all of campus for the athletic facilities, or what might be coming down the pike there. But does anybody care to touch on athletic facilities at Bates?
Jared, I'll dive in just because we are working on a tour.
Awesome.
Admissions at athletics, we're in its final cut. Aaron Morse, who's our assistant sports information director, is amazing, and it's going to be fantastic. Maybe ready by the end of next week, so stay tuned for that. But that's an exciting development to share with the folks.
And from the student perspective, do you feel that athletics is a big part of campus life?
I think certainly, it can be in an aspect. I will say a lot of the games, a lot of our beats are pretty heavily attended by other students. And I think that's, as a student athlete, it's really awesome to both get to go watch other student athletes compete. And also when people come to our races and things like that, it's also really, really nice to see that support that we have. But I think kind of the overarching things that kind of goes beyond just athletics. I think both, whenever there's like an art opening at in the art gallery, like those are always really heavily attended. All the theater productions I know, and the a cappella concerts are super, super packed always. So I think it kind of goes beyond just like the kind of support in athletics. It's more just like a support of the general kind of community that we have at Bates. So in that capacity, sure, sports is definitely kind of a big presence on campus.
And then from the coach's perspective, do you guys feel that, or what type of commitment does Bates have to its athletic programs? Do you guys feel like you're well supported as head coaches? Or what can you say in terms of overall commitment to athletics? Let's go with John.
Yeah. No, I'll just speak specifically from a basketball standpoint. As you can see in my virtual background, the floor and the bleachers are new, and that's something that our new administration really wanted to see done, was an upgrade to a very old building. Although a historic building, it just needed a little Band-Aid. So I think anytime there's a facility renovation, there is a level of commitment to the athletic experience. And for better and worse, the president of the college sits right behind our bench during basketball games. And I'm just grateful not to get an email at midnight, questioning my decision-making or language during the game. So, but I think that just shows, when you have the top-down approach, that the president of the school is active at athletic events. That makes me feel, not just as an alum, but also as an employee of the college, that athletics is an important piece of the experience.
Absolutely. And I would also say, from an admission standpoint, as one of a few athletic admission liaisons, I definitely feel that Bates really supports the athletic department. It's the only other department on campus that is involved really in terms of building the class. They're the only other department that can really recruit students. And so without a doubt, I'd say they're well supported. Other questions? Looks like we've covered most of these. again, maybe from the student perspective, if you could describe how often your teams are meeting for practices or even games. Are most of the games during the week? Or are they on the weekends? What does that look like?
For me, on the cross country and track and field teams, I mean, you could say that in a way it's similar to a high school schedule. So you have your classes until 4 o'clock, and then that's typically when we have practice every day, and then that'll go until dinner. And our competitions are usually on Saturdays. And for me, that was very similar to my high school schedule. So I think that you can think of it like that. But probably a little bit up a level. I know that our coach encourages us to, get additional runs in on our own time to fit our full training schedule in.
And then going back to the coaches, for student athletes who may have an interest in things like sports medicine, do they ever approach you guys about getting firsthand experience with some of your teams?
We've had some student athletes who have, I don't know if I'd call it an internship, but I guess job shadowed our athletic training staff just to get a sense of what they do on a day-to-day basis, probably more so when athletes aren't getting treatment, what the administrative duties look like from that lens. So there are opportunities to sort of create your own purposeful work, if you want to call it that, within our campus. And certainly our athletic trainers have been open to students getting involved in that process. So that's something that you can certainly investigate.
Yeah, I just add to that too, Jared, that I've had the opportunity during a couple of short terms. Aidan mentioned short term at Bates, just something that's unique to our academic calendar, just one course that you take in May. And I have had 2 of the women on my team do a class with me during that period, specifically about coaching and leadership, sort of developing their own coaching philosophy. We did a lot of reading about coaches and leaders. So that was kind of a unique opportunity too for some women who are really specifically interested in, potentially being a coach or in some sort of kind of leadership role.
Okay. Well, and so I think we've exhausted most of these questions. I think have basically been touched on. So are there any other questions that folks have out there?
So Jared, I'm gonna slide in
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just because this one is close to home or literally in my home. Some of the students are asking about training, and we talked about it a little bit, and most of our panelists have hinted on the out of season expectations, but can someone give a little bit more structure to this idea of what does training look like? What does support look like? Are there specific workouts either in the weight room? Are there diet plans? Is there a nutritionist on staff? Like how is this culture of athletics supported outside of just practices and games?
So I can talk a little bit on this one. So we have, for rowing, we have both a fall season and then a spring season. So kind of after our fall season wraps up and during that period of time, we usually will establish kind of a lifting program that you can maintain on your own during the winter when the coaches aren't there. So during that winter period, it's up to the captains to run the practices. So we don't have the same kind of contact with the coaches. So we kind of set some groundwork during the fall to set our lifting program, and then kind of some training programs that we can continue on our own. And then also during that off period, sometimes we'll work with one of the strength conditioners on campus, Mike Seltzer, usually, and we'll do some technique work with him to usually learn a lot about proper lifting techniques and understanding just different aspects that go into flexibility and mobility in our sport. So that's kind of just some examples of a little bit of the support we have, especially during that off season. But I don't know, Christopher, do you have any other experiences?
Yeah, I can touch on the fact that we do have a nutritionist that will visit campus. I think they come on like at least once a month and set up appointments with one-on-one with students to make sure if they have any concerns. For me, I actually was anemic this past season and didn't find out until mid-season, and my coach set me up an appointment with them, and so I got to have that one-on-one appointment, and they taught me everything I needed to know to get me out of that rut, and it was super helpful.
I'll say
Thanks
that
for sharing.
training. So for like a winter sport, we're really reliant on our strength coach and really our senior leadership when we cannot be there. And so, Coach Seltzer designs specific programs for each sport based on the needs for those teams to work out, and that would look like usually 2 to 3 days a week in the preseason, and the same would be in the postseason after we've rested for a little bit. But I think that there's so much science now behind injury prevention and mobility that to have a certified instructor with our athletes, again, is another selling point to Bates, because I don't think every NESCAC school has that same staff in place. So we really take advantage of it, maybe not to Dean Seltzer's liking, but it's certainly helpful for our athletes as they train year round. And I've seen the dramatic improvements in my athletes. I've always said that DNA is DNA, but he's starting to make me think that can be changed a little bit through the program that we have in place.
I'm going to go tell him you said that. So if you hadn't put it together, Coach Seltzer is my partner, and I get to hear all the training details. We have some hardworking Division III athletes at Bates College for sure. So along those lines, maybe Aidan, if you want to talk a little bit about balance. We've hinted on it a little bit. Like, how do you juggle all of this? You are a D3 athlete, but you have commitments in season, out of season. You have a full, robust life as a Bates College student. How do you balance it
all? I don't know that there's like a kind of really straightforward answer to it. I think it just kind of takes practice. It's very fortunate. I kind of was an athlete in high school still. So, kind of just continuing that schedule into college, it didn't feel ever super different of a transition. But I think the one of the most helpful things, and Christopher talked about it a little earlier, but was upperclassmen my first year at Bates. So kind of watching how they were able to balance everything they had going on was just really helpful to me to kind of like learn when you fit in time to go to the library, and like when you meet with professors and things like that. So that for me was probably the most helpful thing for me to find balance between all the different things I've been involved in. But I think it's definitely takes a little bit of practice. It takes, the first season is always a little tricky to find it, but I think once you get into the rhythm of things, it really starts to feel pretty natural.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And Christopher, thank you for sharing your personal anecdote about the nutritionist. I appreciate that that's, personal stuff, but really valuable for folks to hear too. I want to address, so Adrian and Noah ask some sports specific questions about football and skiing. Others of you may have particular questions about your particular sport. So I encourage you to be in touch with coaches, ask them directly, start that conversation that Coach Montgomery was talking about, and they can give you more specific advice related to their program. We can share more information as well. So Jared and I are available. Our beautiful faces are on the website under the admission counselors or admission staff page, so don't hesitate to be in touch with us. And certainly Aidan and Christopher are on campus for one more year, so you can track them down and ask them more questions as well. But want to make full use of this last few moments together and just ask in the vein of why Bates, of all the wonderful schools out there that our students are considering or that our panelists considered either coming to as a student or working at, why Bates? So Coach Furbush, you get to go first.
Oh, geez, put me on the spot. I was just gonna, before I answer this question, I was going to just prepare the prospective student athletes on the call. One of the things that I try to do through the recruiting process is I'll ask an individual why I should continue to recruit them. So obviously I've seen somebody play, I'm intrigued by their play, I get to know their family a little bit, and then the process sometimes can get stale as you're having conversations. So I'll actually ask them, why should I continue to recruit you? And it's amazing the stuff that kids who are much smarter than me put in writing on why they want to be at Bates and why they're a recruitable athlete. And so I would say be prepared to answer a question like that as the process evolves. But why Bates? I think the people on this call are make Bates what it is. And I think, I don't know enough about the other schools or their coaching staffs to make a fair assessment, but I'll tell you this, that the coaches, the employees, the other students, they're all committed to each other. And it's such an authentic feel that it's hard to get through a Zoom, but if you get the opportunity to get on campus, you'll see that firsthand. And that's the reason I chose to come back here as an employee, because I really believe in the mission and this model. And it's the people that make this place great. And it's amazing to see what we've done since this virus happened and how we're going to have campus operating in full next week. The amount of work and collaboration that went into place to make this happen is indescribable, really. And so I'm just honored to be part of this process and hope that we run smoothly this year.
Christopher?
Yeah, so I looked at a bunch of schools, big schools, small schools, and I eventually made this list of small liberal arts college, Division III athletics, test optional, which narrowed me down into the New England area, looking at these NESCAC schools. And I ultimately got to visit some of these campuses, but really it was the conversations I had with the coaches and with my interviewers, and I got the sense of each campus. And for me at Bates, I just felt so welcomed there. I knew that I was gonna be able to explore all the interests I had, including new ones, and able to be that full student athlete that I wanted to be. A piece about my talk with the coach when I was looking at Bates, he mentioned that, he doesn't put a ton of time into recruiting because he puts a lot of his time into the athletes that he has with him. And I thought that was just something that was so special, that this is really Division III athletics, and Bates coaches are really going to care about their experience. So that was my spiel.
Al?
I would say, well, both Coach Furbush and Christopher just spoke really eloquently to the people here, but I just want to echo that. I mean, when I was deciding whether to join this community at Bates, when you make your pros and cons list, like you all will do when you're looking at schools, any of the challenges that I thought I might face were totally overtaken by the people that I met. Mostly just really, really genuine people. Like you just feel the people here are sincere and supportive, and sort of you can get through any of those challenges with the people around you. And I certainly feel like, specifically in my program, that is, aside from winning every game that we possibly can, building a culture where we create a family of women who really care about each other is what it's about. And I think Bates is really about that. But I would also say the food, man, the food, you got to eat 3 times a day, guys. And the food is so good. And that's important in making your decisions. So don't take that one lightly.
Jared, how about you? I don't know if I ever heard you say why Bates.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest with you, it's an absolutely, I'm biased, but it's an amazing institution. It's a very personalized education. As several of the others have mentioned, the people that we bring to Bates are absolutely fantastic. I think it has a lot to do with sort of the Bates history and the founding. Being the first co-ed college in New England, that strong sense of inclusion that we have at the college, the strong sense of community. 95% of our students live on the Bates campus for all 4 years. It's a true residential campus community. But amazing people. They come from all 50 states, our students, nearly 70 different countries. you know, I've worked for 3 other institutions. I also transferred twice as an undergraduate. I've really been on a college campus ever since I left for college back in 1995. So I've seen a lot of places. And again, you know, I'm biased, but Bates is an amazing institution. So I think if the participants on this Zoom session have an option to be a student at Bates, you have a lot to look forward to. So,
How about you, Aidan? Why did you choose Bates?
I think I'd echo everything that has been said already. It's really the people that have absolutely made me choose Bates and then really shaped my experience here over the past couple of years. The food also big factor too. I love the food. But I think, you know, definitely the people, how passionate everyone is about the work they're doing, both in athletics, also balancing that passion with the work everyone's doing academically, and then all the other things people are involved in, I think is super, super cool and really unique. You know, I love to hear about what other students are doing in like classes, you know, teammates who are different majors, how passionate they get about, you know, chemistry or history or you know, the coursework they're doing. I think it's really, really cool. And then we all have that kind of common goal on the team. And then I think on campus, there is kind of that common goal to pursue kind of that higher knowledge. And then we are able to kind of all bond over that. So I think that for me has been a big factor of why I chose Bates, and then kind of ultimately a culmination of the past 4 years.
Awesome. Well, I'll keep my answer brief, knowing that we're coming up on the hour here. But as a prospective student, it was that idea as an athlete that I could pursue it at a high level and do lots of other things. That was so exciting and appealing to me. And Bates just seemed like a place that had possibility, that the doors were open and I could define for myself what this was going to look like and have athletics be a part of it, but not the be all and end all. So to Coach Furbush's comment earlier that, you know, I wasn't going into a career, you know, professional field hockey. So I was aware of that when I was 18 and tried to make a choice related to that. And then coming back as an employee 15 years ago, it was this idea that I could work for a place I believed in with a mission and a culture that I wanted to continue to foster and meet young people and be a valuable, if small, part of their experience as they're navigating this process. And Bates, again, to everyone's point, is full of people that care about the work they do, care about providing opportunities for our students, listening to our students, engaging in a culture that wants to progress and evolve. And I think it's pretty unique and special. I get misty talking about Bates because I miss being on campus and I miss you guys. So I want to say thank you to Aidan, to Jared, to Alison, to Christopher, to John for joining us on this Friday afternoon in Maine. Get outside and play before the thunderstorms come. But in the meantime, for the students who are joining us for the conversation, we're so excited that you're considering Bates, want to be helpful as you navigate this process. So please do not hesitate to be in touch as we can help. You'll get a survey, probably within the next few hours, you'll get an email from Bates with a survey asking you how we did, what more information you'd like to know, if you'd like to be in touch with anybody else. So take some time to fill it out. And I gave you the teaser that there is a beautiful, really cool athletics tour coming. And I hope to be able to announce that via email in the next week or so. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, it's always a great day to be a Bobcat. Have a good night.